tonight on Reporting Scotland. The First Minister is accused of dithering over reopening schools as she prepares to announce a further easing of lockdown. Good evening. Pupils, parents and teachers are right now all trying to imagine how schools might work in the new normal. Blended learning, homeschooling, severely reduced face-to-face teaching. Today, the First Minister said she'd move heaven and earth to get schools back to normal as soon as possible. But opposition parties have accused the Scottish Government of dithering.
Freya and Caris are looking forward to getting back to school in Glasgow, but a part-time return would mean Mum can't go back to work.
I'm fortunate enough to be able to be at home and support the kids as best I can, but that's at the expense of my working life. So you're having to put the work part of your life on hold? Absolutely, and I'm the part-time worker in the household, so it seems as though that that's the decision that we have to make.
But might it be possible for children to get back to school full-time from August the 11th, rather than blending class time with home learning? And Holyrood, the First Minister, says she wholeheartedly agrees and describes blended learning as a contingency rather than the core plan. Opposition leaders sense a shift
Jackson Carlo
and say school return plans are in confusion.
As local authorities try to work out how to carry out this so-called blended learning, one parent group is calling for pupils to be back in school full-time in August. Here's our education reporter, Lucy White.
1/3, 1/2. Not sums in the classroom, but the amount of time pupils might be spending back in school buildings in August. But for some parents, nothing less than 100% will do.
We'd like to see children return 100% full-time under completely normal circumstances with no disproportionate or harmful social distancing measures. I think what we're looking at here is a huge social experiment that nobody has really considered deeply. We're a knee-jerk reaction to a pandemic that is on its way out. We can't assume that these social distancing measures are not going to have negative impacts because we know it does.
Most Scottish local authorities are still planning for what blended learning could look like, with many stressing the difficulty for in-school socially distanced teaching days. Some have confirmed that in most cases, pupils will be in for a minimum of 2 days a week, with some variation between primary and secondary. Edinburgh City Council says only 1/3 of children would be in school at any one time. The BBC has also seen proposals for one secondary in Glasgow to have pupils in school 3 days one week and 2 days the next. The First Minister is encouraging councils to find creative ways to bring more pupils back for longer. But the body which represents local authorities in Scotland, COSLA, has told us that they've already had to find £145 million to cover costs caused by the pandemic.
Students are due to go back to school from the 11th of August, but Mr Swinney says it's unlikely they'll be back to normal before the end of the academic year because of social distancing.
And the question that no one's answered yet is we don't know how parents can go back to work if their children are stuck at home 2 or 3 days a week.
I think we've seen some interesting evidence over the weekend about the role that masks can play. Obviously, in England, they've become mandatory on public transport. If that evidence stands up, I think if that could close the distance and increase the numbers in classrooms, that's something we definitely should be looking at.
Brian, this is such a difficult situation, isn't it? And opposition parties have been highly critical of what's coming out of the Scottish Government on this, saying there's been mixed messaging.
Alison Payne is a worried parent. Her children may only be at school once a week in August. Others elsewhere may be in more often. She also works for an organisation which tries to come up with political ideas.
We cannot have a situation that come August, some children in Scotland will get one formal day of education per week, while others will get 2. Some might get more than 2. That variation is simply unacceptable. It cannot be the limit of our ambition.
And Lindsay, the first thing you've picked out is education. Been very controversial all week. Jack McConnell in the Sunday Herald this morning, as he was saying on Radio Scotland yesterday, he's not happy.
Yes, Gordon, the former First Minister has been very vocal on his views on what the government and councils are doing to get schools back in August. We've been hearing a lot this week about this blended learning approach where pupils could be in school for a couple of days and then homeschooling on other days. Jack McConnell thinks the government needs to do much more to try to get education back more in a more normal way. He has actually been saying that the education crisis that we're facing is as big as the health crisis, as big as the jobs crisis. And he's saying, look, really, a large group of pupils could be affected by this in their future, in their education, if this isn't rectified and if something isn't done to get a better quality of education in place when schools go back in August.
When the school doors finally open, how normal will it be? Scottish ministers want to introduce blended learning after summer, where pupils split their time between classroom and home. A challenge for parents who've already had 3 months of homeschooling. Say hello to Caitlin Smart and her 5 kids, 3 of them in primary school.
It's been really tough, and we gave up, to be honest. We had to give up. There was not a lot we could do. It was just such a stressful situation for us. Continuing this is just... I actually brings you to tears at the thought of it, because if I don't do the learning with them, they will fall behind, and it could really impact on their future kind of aspirations. But at the same time, if we do, it could really impact on every one of our mental health.
When pupils go back, the aim is to have a 50-50 split. Half the time learning in school, half the time learning at home. Social distancing will have to be introduced, and also councils may have to repurpose some buildings to act as schools. All of that will cost them money. Some MSPs think more determination could result in more normality.
And I believe what many parents are looking for is a commitment from ministers to at least try to get schools back as normal for the beginning of term. What's disappointing to those parents is that doesn't actually seem to be the ambition being set.
Right, and the other aspect of all of this is it's really expensive, isn't it, for the government, for councils?